When Mary Pickford married Douglas Fairbanks, they were two of the biggest names in Hollywood. Their Pickfair home became famous for hosting lavish parties, with many of the industry's elite in attendance. However, behind the glamorous facade, few were aware of the darker side of their life together. In 1930, a scandal broke out that would be the beginning of the end for their relationship, though we will discuss this more in detail later. The woman known to audiences as Mary Pickford was actually born Gladys Marie Smith in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on April 8, 1892. When she was only 6 years old, tragedy struck her family. Her father sustained a head injury while working on a local steamship, which led to the formation of a blood clot. Just 6 months after the accident, he died of a cerebral hemorrhage, a devastating blow for the family. This loss didn't just break their hearts, it also shattered their fragile working-class existence, plunging them into deep poverty. Mary's family was so poor that her mother had no choice but to rent out rooms in their home to boarders in order to make ends meet. One of these boarders happened to be involved in local theater. After meeting Mary and her younger sister, this boarder suggested they take on minor roles in a play he was working on. Little did they know, this seemingly small opportunity would become the start of something much bigger for both of them. Mary Pickford signed a film contract with the famed director D.W. Griffith, and it didn't take long for her to become one of the hardest-working actresses of her time. In 1909 alone, she appeared in an astonishing 51 films, almost one film every week. Despite being just 17 years old, she showed incredible versatility, taking on a wide range of roles, from playing the part of a mother to portraying a lady of the night. Her ability to adapt to such diverse characters set her apart from others, even at such a young age. The actor that Griffith arranged to rehearse with Mary Pickford that day was Owen Moore, and teenage Mary had a huge crush on him. He eventually became her co-star in The Violin Maker of Cremona, her first leading role. Both Pickford and Moore shared a lot in common, having grown up as children of working-class immigrants and getting into trouble with their siblings when they were young. Their shared background allowed young love to blossom between them, but there was one significant issue. Pickford's mother couldn't stand him. Mary's mother, Charlotte, strongly disapproved of her teenage daughter dating anyone, and she was particularly against Owen Moore. But instead of discouraging Mary Pickford, her mother's disapproval only made Owen even more appealing to her. By late 1910, Owen Moore gave Mary a serious ultimatum. He demanded that she tell her mother about their relationship and insisted that she marry him. In January 1911, the young couple eloped, but rather than being a fairy tale, it turned into a nightmare. As 19-year-old Mary Pickford walked down the aisle, she realized she had made a terrible mistake. The secrecy surrounding their marriage didn't stop at the wedding. Instead of enjoying her new life with her husband, Mary quietly returned to her mother's apartment, sneaking into bed as if nothing had happened. For a while, Mary was able to keep up the act, hiding both her marriage from her mother and her growing regret from Owen Moore. But let's not forget, they all worked for the same studio, IMP, which made the situation incredibly delicate. It was like a house of cards waiting to collapse. Not long after their secret wedding, IMP made the decision to move its entire operation to Cuba. This meant that Pickford, along with her secret husband, her disapproving mother, and her two unsuspecting siblings, would be spending several days confined together on the same ship. Mary couldn't handle the pressure any longer and finally confessed the truth to her family. Their reactions were devastating. Her mother broke down in tears while her sister and brother were left in a stunned silence, not knowing how to respond. But for Mary, the emotional turmoil was far from over. As soon as the ship arrived at its destination, Owen Moore left to drink himself senseless, a habit that had become common for him. Yet his drinking was just one of the many issues in their troubled marriage. Moore's insecurity was overwhelming. The fact that Mary was not only more famous than him, but also earned far more money ate away at him, turning him into a bundle of raw nerves. His jealousy and frustration built up over time, and one day he finally exploded in a fit of rage. He attacked an assistant who was ready to press charges, but his salvation came from an unexpected source. Despite her distaste for him, Mary's mother, Charlotte, stepped in with a plan to save her son-in-law. She arranged for another IMP actor to hide him from local authorities until they could find a ship willing to take him back to the U.S. Charlotte wasn't just trying to remove him from the situation, she also made sure Mary went along with him. However, Moore didn't learn anything from this close call. Instead of improving, his behavior only got worse, and he began to turn his fury and frustration directly toward Mary, making her the new target of his rage. Moore's deep-seated insecurities and ongoing battle with alcohol worsened the situation, as he became physically abusive towards Pickford. From the beginning, she hadn't wanted to marry him but felt pressured into the relationship, and now she found herself feeling completely trapped. The weight of the marriage, combined with Moore's unpredictable behavior, made it even harder for her to see a way out. One particular incident during filming shook her to the core. While shooting a scene that required her to swim in the polluted waters of the Hudson River, she narrowly avoided being struck by a boat. In her state of panic and confusion, she misinterpreted the intentions of the man who came to her rescue, fearing he was trying to drown her. This harrowing experience deeply traumatized her, and she realized that she couldn't continue living like this. It became clear to her that she needed to take decisive steps to change her situation. Mary Pickford informed the studio head that she was leaving IMP, and not long after, Owen Moore followed suit. The couple then signed with a studio called Majestic. Mary secured a lucrative $225 a week contract, and the same offer was extended to Moore. This seemed to ease his fragile ego, but Mary was harboring a secret. She had quietly arranged for his contract behind the scenes. The studio had only agreed to sign him as part of their effort to keep her on board. Mary Pickford had to become especially skilled at maneuvering through the studio system during the silent film era. Though in many respects, she was still just a young woman. She leaned heavily on her mother, Charlotte, which caused growing tension between her and her husband. Their time together as a couple was rare, since Mary would frequently invite Charlotte to stay with them, much to Owen's frustration. This situation drove him to distraction, but rather than confront the issue, he would often disappear on drinking sprees. Despite Majestic Studios' efforts to portray them as a happy couple, the strain in their relationship was becoming increasingly evident. Mary Pickford and Owen Moore managed to get through only a few films at Majestic before their toxic relationship became unbearable. It was clear that something had to change, so they parted ways with the studio. Both signed new contracts with different studios, officially ending their professional collaboration. While this news made it to the gossip columns, there was another part that didn't gain as much attention. They also separated personally. Though it wasn't as dramatic as filing for divorce, for Pickford, it was certainly a step in the right direction. Mary Pickford had the option to work with any studio, but when reflecting on her career, she came to a surprising realization. Out of all her experiences, no one had pushed her as hard as the man who discovered her, D.W. Griffith. Pickford wasn't simply motivated by money. Her true passion was to become the best actress she could be. While studios like IMP and Majestic compensated her well, their films ultimately lacked the quality and challenge she was seeking. Pickford decided to return to D.W. Griffith and Biograph Pictures, even though it required her to take a substantial pay cut. Despite the financial setback, she was more than willing to make the sacrifice. The emotional toll of her previous experiences had weighed heavily on her, and when she finally saw Griffith again, the sense of relief was overwhelming. According to reports, she collapsed into his arms, crying tears of gratitude and release. The reunion marked a significant emotional turning point for her, showing just how much she valued the stability and mentorship that Griffith and Biograph offered. Mary Pickford not only starred in but also wrote Hearts Adrift, a film that skyrocketed her to fame, making her one of the biggest stars in cinema, rivaled only by Charlie Chaplin. This success solidified her image as America's sweetheart, a title coined by a writer from the famous Players publicity team. Her fans adored her, viewing her as the embodiment of innocence, purity, and grace. Her long, flowing blonde curls became a symbol of her youth and femininity, standing out during a time when most women wore their hair up. It's rumored that during this period, Mary Pickford developed strong feelings for James Kirkwood, a director under contract with famous players. Years later, Kirkwood himself admitted to having had a romantic relationship with Pickford, even stating that they had talked about marriage. Whether or not the rumors were true, the pair undeniably shared a successful professional collaboration, creating a series of hit films together. Though unlucky in love, Pickford proved to be sharp and savvy in business, seizing yet another opportunity to negotiate a raise from her studio. Maintaining her public image was crucial, and this, unfortunately, meant she couldn't easily distance herself from her marriage to Owen Moore. They often posed for publicity photos, portraying the image of a happy couple, but behind the scenes their relationship was deeply troubled. Pickford was battling severe depression, and when one of her films performed poorly, it pushed her into an even darker emotional state. Mary accepted an invitation for a weekend getaway at a friend's mansion upstate, and she and Owen set off, unaware that they were about to encounter fate. On their way, they paused to check the map when another car pulled up beside them. Inside was rising star Douglas Fairbanks and his wife, also heading to the same destination. Fairbanks' wife warmly welcomed Mary into their social circle, but what neither of them knew was that Douglas Fairbanks was harboring a dark secret. He frequently cheated on his wife. He had been involved in several affairs over the years, but they were always short-lived, and he never seriously considered leaving his wife. Returning to her was something he did without question, that is, until he met Mary Pickford. While Mary was known for her good girl image, Douglas Fairbanks was viewed as the ultimate Boy Scout, a wholesome figure who, like Mary, understood that an affair would jeopardize their carefully crafted public personas and livelihoods. To avoid the growing temptation, Fairbanks moved his family to California, possibly hoping the distance would help. Yet, it was a tragedy that eventually brought them together. When Fairbanks' mother passed away, Pickford offered him solace, taking him on a drive to help him cope with his grief. This moment of comfort sparked something deeper between them, creating a bond that neither had anticipated nor could ignore. Whether their affair began before that night is unclear, but it certainly took off afterward. Not long after, Mary Pickford moved to California, where she and Douglas Fairbanks began sneaking off together whenever possible, and even when it wasn't. Much like her mother's disapproval had fueled her teenage love for Owen Moore, the thrill of sneaking around reignited a spark in Mary that had been missing during her bouts of depression. She even went so far as to boast about visiting Fairbanks' wife in the hospital, only to slip away with him for a secret date in the hallway, a brazen move that she perhaps shouldn't have been so proud of. The affair between Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks became an open secret in Hollywood, a scandal that could have easily shattered Pickford's career. However, a major distraction loomed on the horizon, the U.S. entering World War I in 1917. With the country at war, the government expected Hollywood to step up and do its part. Throughout 1918, Pickford and Fairbanks crisscrossed the nation, tirelessly selling war bonds. Sometimes they worked together, while other times they turned it into a friendly competition, each trying to outdo the other in raising funds for the war effort. Fairbanks' wife, Beth, had been patiently waiting for him in New York City, but eventually she reached her breaking point. When Fairbanks visited New York but stayed at a different hotel from his family, Beth's frustration boiled over. She went directly to the press and confirmed the rumors that he had been having an affair. While she didn't reveal the identity of the other woman, she did mention that it was an actress he had business ties to. Naturally, all eyes turned to Mary Pickford. Though the accusations were mounting, Pickford firmly denied the rumors. But the worst was yet to come. If Beth Fairbanks' statement to the press had been bad, Owen Moore's response was infinitely more humiliating. Under the guise of defending Mary Pickford's honor, Moore made a public statement that was as damaging as it gets. He painted himself as a victim and described Pickford in the most demeaning terms, saying she was like a child who had been taken advantage of by Douglas Fairbanks. To make matters even worse, Moore added that the other woman involved was now ill, further complicating the scandal. He ended his statement by declaring his intention to sue Fairbanks for interfering in his marriage. For Mary Pickford, it was her worst nightmare realized. The truth was out, and the timing couldn't have been worse. Despite the scandal, Pickford's business instincts remained sharp, and she managed to secure a lucrative new contract with another studio. Her profitability was unaffected, and she kept a low profile while Douglas Fairbanks faced the fallout. His wife, Beth, had demanded a divorce, but rather than letting the court records be filled with the sordid details of his affair with Pickford, two of Fairbanks' friends concocted stories about flings with nameless, faceless women to deflect attention. Surprisingly, Owen Moore's dramatic outburst worked. The courts granted the divorce, and the scandal that had gripped Hollywood faded from the papers as quickly as it had appeared. The illicit nature of Pickford and Fairbanks' affair had added a layer of thrill to their romance, but now that the secret was out, it didn't diminish their passion one bit. In fact, it only seemed to intensify. Fairbanks, deeply in love with Pickford, relentlessly pursued her, asking her repeatedly to marry him. Their love was genuine, a true connection that had blossomed despite the chaos around them. But on the other hand, Pickford was also dealing with a man who was fiercely determined to get what he wanted. Fairbanks was not one to give up easily, and his persistence only highlighted the lengths he was willing to go to make Pickford his wife. Their romance may have started in scandal, but it was clear that for Fairbanks, it was more than just an affair. It was real, all-consuming love. Owen Moore had always been known for his moody and gloomy disposition, but once news of Mary Pickford's affair surfaced, he quickly shifted his image. Suddenly, he portrayed himself as a long-suffering victim and an optimist in the face of these circumstances. There was a calculated reason behind this change. He knew their marriage was doomed. With the end inevitable, Moore saw an opportunity for a parting gift. He demanded $100,000 in exchange for agreeing to a divorce, seizing the moment to benefit from the scandal. Pickford was horrified, but money was ultimately a drop in the bucket. Once she agreed to Moore's payday, they arranged a quickie divorce in Nevada. It was easier there than in California. There were still some rules, however. This was America's sweetheart, and as soon as the judge laid eyes on her, it seemed like he forgot most of them. He granted the divorce, and Pickford returned to Hollywood, reassuring the press that she would not only atone for her sins but would never remarry Fairbanks. Once again, Douglas Fairbanks asked Mary Pickford to marry him, but she had one major fear holding her back. If their fans turned against them, would their love be strong enough to ensure a happy ending? Fairbanks reassured her that they would be just fine. Still, Mary hesitated. To ease her doubts, Fairbanks came up with a bold, unconventional plan. Instead of a grand wedding, he surprised her one night by inviting her and two guests to dinner. The guests, a county marriage clerk and a local pastor. Despite the surprise, the plan worked, and the two were married on the spot. Mary Pickford initially protested, insisting that she wouldn't marry Douglas Fairbanks that night. After all, she wasn't even dressed for the occasion. But just 2 nights later, she not only changed her dress but also changed her mind. 26 days after her divorce from Owen Moore, Pickford and Fairbanks tied the knot. The whirlwind nature of their marriage was so quick that they accidentally announced it to the press before informing many of their closest friends and family. Realizing their mistake, they scrambled to correct it. When the news finally broke, the media pounced. The scandal of their hasty marriage so soon after Pickford's divorce became tabloid fodder, with the press eager to sensationalize the quickie wedding. Despite the public backlash, their love story continued to capture imaginations across the globe, solidifying them as Hollywood's most iconic couple, even if the start of their marriage was steeped in controversy. The Attorney General of Nevada announced he would be pursuing charges against Mary Pickford for lying during her divorce proceedings, and the Baptist Church was outraged. However, when it came to their fans, the reaction was far different. Despite the scandal, the public didn't seem to buy into the idea that Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks had done anything wrong. Pickford had braced herself for a backlash, but it never really materialized. After World War I, people in the U.S. and abroad were hungry for good news, yearning for a love story, and Pickford gave them exactly that. Timing was everything, and for once, it worked in her favor. During their honeymoon, Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks were greeted with a hero's welcome everywhere they went. Rather than tarnish their image, the scandal had, if anything, only intensified their fans' devotion. However, some admirers took things too far. While in England, fans nearly pulled Pickford from a car, causing a riot to break out. Despite these intense reactions, Pickford remained the original America's sweetheart, as well as a pioneering figure in Hollywood, becoming the first female actor, writer, and producer in the industry. To top it all off, Mary Pickford and Douglas Fairbanks became Hollywood's first official power couple. As a wedding gift, Fairbanks gave Pickford a grand home, which they named Pickfair. It soon became the go-to venue for lavish parties, attended by the most elite guests in town. The couple was riding high, seemingly on top of the world. But the question lingered. How long could it last? In her relationship with Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford applied lessons she had learned from her first marriage. For one, she kept her mother at a healthy distance, and secondly, there was no room for the on-again, off-again drama. For the first 8 years of their marriage, Pickford and Fairbanks were inseparable, never spending a night apart. At dinner parties, they always sat together, and Pickford refused to dance with any other man. This devotion was so strong that she once even turned down a dance request from the future King of England, George VI. Pickford and Fairbanks were the undisputed king and queen of Hollywood, and Pickfair was their grand castle. Guests filled their home nightly, often a dozen or more, and they hosted massive parties with prestigious figures like Albert Einstein and Helen Keller, as well as visiting European royalty. One can only imagine the lively and fascinating conversations that took place at those dinner parties. On the surface, their marriage seemed like a fairy tale, but behind closed doors, it was quietly unraveling, with a tragedy brewing beneath the glamorous facade. Despite being constantly surrounded by people, Mary Pickford felt deeply lonely. Her fame had made her unapproachable, and she had few close friends. Adding to her isolation was the darker side of Douglas Fairbanks. The reason they were never apart was rooted in his intense jealousy. He became upset if any of their male guests so much as looked at her. This possessiveness cast a shadow over their relationship, revealing cracks in what seemed to be a perfect union. It was certainly not a great sign of things to come. For a decade, Pickford and Fairbanks had reigned as Hollywood's most famous couple, with no one rivaling their level of stardom. But, as with all things, their golden era began to fade. As Fairbanks' popularity waned, he grew anxious and desperate, grappling with the reality of his declining fame. Meanwhile, Pickford, who had resisted for so long, turned to alcohol, following in the footsteps of many members of her family. The distance between them grew wider, and their attempt to work on a movie together only amplified the cracks in their relationship, pushing them further apart. Douglas Fairbanks began baiting Mary Pickford, and even when he didn't, his behavior infuriated her. To make matters worse, the Great Depression hit Hollywood hard, dealing a crushing blow to the once thriving film industry. Both Pickford and Fairbanks' careers suffered, which only intensified Fairbanks' already troubling behavior. The couple, who once never spent a night apart, now found themselves separated for months at a time as Fairbanks went off on far-flung adventures without her. Adding to the strain, he fell back into old habits from his first marriage, cheating on her, further widening the gap between them. Throughout her 3 marriages, whether happy or not, Mary Pickford never had biological children, only adopting later with her 3rd husband. Many have speculated that there may be a heartbreaking reason behind this. It's rumored that Pickford became pregnant during her marriage to her first husband, Owen Moore, either in 1910 before they were married while she was still a teenager, or in 1913, when their relationship was in serious trouble. This alleged pregnancy has led to much speculation about why she never had children of her own. So, why was there no child? Pickford claimed that she suspected an equestrian accident had left her infertile. However, many believe she may have lost a child during her tumultuous relationship with Owen Moore, which could explain the absence of children. In that era, it was almost common practice for studios to keep such secrets hidden, often paying to cover up any evidence of scandal. But something far more sinister was on the horizon, threatening to unravel the carefully crafted public image of Hollywood's sweetheart. Pickford's career decline in the 1930s was a professional heartbreak, but she also faced deep personal sorrow. In 1932, her brother Jack visited her, looking frail and thin. When he said goodbye, Mary had a sinking feeling it would be their last meeting. Sadly, she was right. Jack passed away soon after, most likely due to his drinking. The tragedy didn't end there. Just 3 years later, Mary lost her sister to a similar fate. The family's long-standing struggles had returned to haunt them, and with both siblings gone, Mary found herself as the last victim of the same problem. Mary Pickford's drinking worsened as her marriage to Douglas Fairbanks unraveled. Despite their struggles, Fairbanks would often come back to her until one day he didn't. He sent a wire to Pickford stating that he wouldn't be returning to Pickfair, not then and not ever. The news shattered Pickford, but she pulled herself together and filed for divorce, citing mental anguish as the reason. In the end, she kept Pickfair while Fairbanks walked away with everything else. Just as the divorce was finalized, Douglas Fairbanks returned to Pickfair, begging Mary Pickford to take him back. He even sought help from his ex-wife, Beth, to convince Mary to reconsider. After the divorce, his efforts only grew more intense. It was evident to everyone that they still loved each other, but Mary wasn't ready to let him back into her life. She gently put him off, and Fairbanks eventually retreated, though he continued sending telegraphs, confessing his undying love for her. By the time Mary Pickford was finally ready to respond to Fairbanks' pleas and sent him a telegraph, it was too late. The night before, Fairbanks had left on a ship to see Lady Sylvia Ashley, and shortly after they married in Paris. The fairy tale of Pickford and Fairbanks had come to its definitive end. After 3 decades of living in relative seclusion, Mary Pickford passed away at the age of 87 in a Santa Monica hospital, following a stroke she had suffered a week earlier. Pickford had been a trailblazer in the film industry, achieving numerous firsts, and the industry honored her legacy for these groundbreaking contributions. As tributes poured in, many also shared their stories about her, some celebrating her achievements, while others revealed long-hidden truths about her life, both good and bad. Don't forget, if you've enjoyed this story or others like it, be sure to show some love by subscribing and liking this video. Stay tuned for more captivating and informative stories just like this one.